Recording.
Okay.
You are welcome, very welcome, fellows. Thank you very much for your interest and willingness to participate in the EVA Minerva SP conference. This morning we had 45 people following the opening conference, and the recording already has more than 200 visualization in the YouTube. I thank Terry Trickett for the organization, the coordination of this international session. In this session, we will have the technical and operational support of Angela from our Pro-Reitoria, and of Professor Eduardo Afonso from the Department of History, both from Unesp. Professora Andrea Dorini Rossi, also. Professor Eduardo will accompany the session and will be available for any eventually. He is fluent in English and works in the area of cultural heritage and social memory. Have a great afternoon of debates and cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, Paolo.
Thank you. Terry,
And thank you for the suggestion that we put on an EVA International Session in Sao Paulo. It's a very strange fact. It's a paradox, in fact, that during this pandemic, where we've all been locked up and secured in our rooms, not able to communicate in the normal way, that EVA has, if you like, emerged from its cocoon, and there's been much more activity between the EVAs worldwide during the pandemic than previously. Now, I do realize, Jim, that when you started the EVAs in 1990, with that very first event at Imperial College, they grew rapidly because you found a wonderful forum for enabling people to meet. And the big thing about EVAs is you get such a big cross-section of people all coming together to discuss a common interest. And that has remained a common denominator between all the EVAs, the 200 or more EVAs that have happened since your very first one, Jim, in London. And for instance, during this pandemic, I've been to Florence, and obviously I've been back home in London a few times, but I've also traveled all the way around Europe, meeting people who possibly I wouldn't have met otherwise. It's a very strange fact of life that the pandemic has, in spite of all appearances, promoted international action. So I think, Paolo, you've caught this idea at exactly the right time. And I think between us, we've chosen a subject which is of huge interest worldwide. And the reason is that, to quote a cliche, we know the world will never be the same again after the pandemic. In other words, the way we can freely travel between countries and visit the museums in every town that we land in is going to be considerably reduced in the future. And of course, for galleries and museums, especially in North America, it's causing a huge problem because a lot of them depend on tourists entering their doors. That's the way they are financed. We're slightly bit luckier in the UK because there's free entry to many of our institutions, but this hasn't prevented a feeling and a movement towards wanting to share art and artifacts rather than become the keepers of them. And this was a transition in thinking that was happening before the pandemic ever landed. The pandemic has exacerbated the thinking that was already in place before it struck. But it's because it has exacerbated this situation that we're all here now, and we want to actually try and find, if not answers, we want to try and some sort of direction where EVAs worldwide can actually maybe even assist in finding a way through the problem that might now affect culture and museums in the post-pandemic world. So we'll launch straight into the conference or the seminar, whatever we like to call it. I should say at the beginning that when, Paolo, you sent invitations out to people, I got a response from exactly those people. I couldn't have named a better set of people to, in fact, give a few insights into this particular discussion. I didn't have to use any persuasive techniques at all. People just floated in, cyber-like, exactly as I wanted them to. So in that way, I thank you very much for all offering to give your insights into this subject. I think many of you will know that Jonathan Bowen, who's going to be our first speaker, is co-chair of the London conference. And I'm going to tell him, as I will tell everybody else, that although you're all allowed 10 minutes, if you want to talk for less than that, that will be all the better. Because we will, as time develops in this discussion, we'll probably get short of time. We'll probably find time creeping up on us. And therefore, remember, in your contributions, less is more. And then after Jonathan's introduction and comments, he will move straight into introducing Tula Giannini from USA, from New York, who is professor at the Pratt Institute in New York. And I know in advance that she will bring music to my ears, quite literally, because she does play the flute, by foreseeing a bright future for those who know how to use digital to make art and engage with audiences. I think she's got a lot to say on that subject. And I completely share her belief in the skills of new media artists becoming an absolutely crucial component of our post-pandemic cultural life. In other words, I think their time has come. So Jonathan, if I could hand over to you and let you make a few comments.
Thank you, Terry. And I'll just try and share my screen.
Yeah. That's it. You've done it.
Okay.
Yeah, you've done it.
Very nice.
Well, welcome to everyone. It's very nice to see you here. As Terry says, it's a lot easier not having to travel. And so there are some benefits, although obviously you lose out on other aspects like networking and all those other things. But anyway, it's very nice to see everyone here. As Terry says, I'm one of the co-chairs for EVA London, and I work with Tula, and we've been writing quite a lot on museums and how COVID has been affecting museums and so on. So the first half of this presentation is the boring bit, and then we'll move on to the exciting bit with Tula halfway through.
You can make the boring bit really fast.
Yes, I'm going to whisk through some boring slides. So this was a typical, since I haven't gone out of Oxford, a lot of my examples are in Oxford. This is the Ashmolean Museum during COVID. It is open again now, but for a while it was in scaffolding. I guess they were mending it and closed, etc. So here's some more pictures of that. That's the Museum of History of Science in Oxford. So they're making the most of the medical situation we're in with nice pictures of of COVID. That's a picture from New York, where Tula is. Again, somebody's got a good sense of humor with the situation we're in. And on the bottom left there, you can see the Ashmolean. If you get past the closed sign, then you have to scan QR codes, wear a mask, and all these other things to get in. Things are a bit better now, but you used to have to book, etc., to get past the guards on the front door. So I'm just going to present a little bit overview of internationally what ICOM and UNESCO have been doing, because ICOM is in charge of museums around the world. They produced two reports. The first one was in May last year, and they had a lot of responses to a survey from over 100 countries, just seeing how COVID was affecting those museums at that time. So at that time, you know, the vast majority of museums were closed. They just had to shut up shop. But that meant that, like we are here, museums were enhancing their digital activities. They were doing a lot more things online, so it accelerated that side of museum activities. So over half museums were doing more social media things. You've got to remember that most museums are very small, so all the museums you've heard of are the very tip of the iceberg with actually paying people to work for them. A lot of museums just have volunteers, nobody paid, you know, so it's very difficult to do a lot of these more exciting things. But social media, I guess you can do for free, and a lot of museums were doing more of that. Most of the staff are having to work at home, not quite as many as closed, but anyway, the vast majority of staff were working from home at that time. And sadly, you know, if you're a freelance staff, a significant number were being laid off, because of course freelance is a lot easier to lay off. And then they did a follow-up report in November last year, and here they still got 900 responses. Response. Now this time, a lot of countries started having furlough schemes, including the UK. So a not insignificant number of staff were on furlough, at least, you know, not working for the museum, but at least getting paid. But as you can see, some of them were also laid off. So actually, well, that's the number between those two dates. So it did go up slightly during that time. Again, museums were enhancing their digital activities, using social media still, so it was continuing much the same there, perhaps slightly less staff being laid off by this time. So it was a slight improvement on the when the pandemic really hit. But, you know, a significant number are planning to downsize on permanent staff, and in particular, freelance staff. So I certainly know museums here where virtually everything is closed up. Unfortunately, you know, curatorial staff, if you're an independent museum, you don't really need curatorial staff because, you know, they're not making money. You need the people who are doing front of house, running the restaurant, the shop, all those other things that bring in cash to museums. So they've got a good website. There's the URL at the bottom. So if you are a museum, you know, they're giving lots of recommendations of things to do, conserving your collection in COVID, because of course, whilst it's in lockdown, you know, maybe that's a good time to get on with that sort of thing if you can pay your staff to do it. There's also a big issue with security because you've got less staff on site. So you've got to make sure that if you've got expensive objects, you look after them well. They give guidance on, you know, using social media, getting to your public, so on, and how to you know, support your community, because a lot of museums will have two communities. There'll be the local community of people who can visit, but also, you know, you've got the potential with the internet of an international community. So things like social media, you can reach anywhere in the world. And then, of course, what do you do when lockdown finishes? So it gives some advice on bringing back your staff and the public, for that matter, to your museum. So UNESCO had a similar report. They've got some pretty similar, you know, they did a similar survey with very similar statistics, you know, 90% closed, going for an online presence. So well, they're obviously interested in places that don't have such good access online. And Africa, for instance, only has 5% of this time with online content. So there's a big digital divide depending on where you are in the world. And, Africa's a very small number of museums can be online. But there's a large number of museums. They reckon that the number of museums has actually gone up since 2012 quite a lot. Whether they're able to count more because they're online and easier to count, I don't know. But anyway, the number of museums is increasing. And then they did a follow-up earlier this year. So, most have lost money compared to pre-pandemic. That's not unsurprising. 43% closed in the first quarter of this year. There was strengthening links with communities. All these tie in with the ICOM results. It's also an opportunity to actually talk to other museums more because you've got email, etc. So there has been more inter-museum cooperation, helping each other and so on. So that's a good point at least. Sadly, a lot of countries, don't support their museums well. Here, big museums do get a lot of government support, but even if you've got, national institutions, a lot of places have been losing money because the government has said, right, we don't need to give you as much money because of the pandemic. And they reckon I don't know whether the number of museums is going up or whether they've just been able to count more, but over 100,000 museums. So that's a little survey of museums internationally online. I'll just do a little plug for EVA London. So if any of you are thinking to write a paper, we're probably going to be a hybrid conference next year. We'll definitely be an online conference, and provided we're able to go to the BCS office in London, which is now at Moorgate, we will online and in-person conference. So hopefully that'll give the best of both worlds for people who can't get to London. So if you do want to write a proposal for a paper, the deadline is the 10th of January next year. So there's now plenty of time to write something. Just this year, for longer papers, we're asking you to at least draft something, because we've had problems in previous years when we've had an abstract and then, we don't know when you actually get to the full 8-page paper, maybe it hasn't been as good as it might have been. So if you want to do a long contribution, please do write as much as you can. It doesn't have to be complete. That's the web address, so do log in and all the information is put on there for submitting and so on. We do have a mailing list, so anyone who wants to subscribe to that, that's where to go. Just type in JISC Mail EVA London and that should find it. Looking at EVA International, well, there's EVA Paris coming up next year as well. I don't have many details. They had to postpone because of the pandemic, but hopefully that's going to be in April. And Florence is going to be in June, and there is a submission deadline for that for 20th of January. So do consider that as well. That's just a one-day conference. And we maintain a website which has got links to all the EVA International information. So anyone who's doing EVA International things that isn't linked from this website, just send me the URL for what you're doing, and I'll make sure it's linked from here. And anyone who wants to know what's going on EVA internationally, that's where we tend to put the links. And again, there is anyone who's really interested in activities internationally, this is a slightly more private mailing list, but just email me. That's my email address. So that's the email to send both if you want to join the mailing list and get a link added to the website. So Tula and I have been writing lots of papers on museums and COVID. So I guess our collaboration led up originally to this book in pre-pandemic 2019. And since then, we've been doing a lot of museums and digital things with how the COVID pandemic has affected those. So these are two papers we had in the last EVA London, one of which was a symposium with lots of authors. And then we've also submitted to the EVA Florence conference, and that's going to be a journal paper. So it's already out as a preprint. So that's the link there. I don't know if there's going to be a website to put slides, but I can put these slides somewhere, either on the EVA London site, or if there's one for this EVA Brazil, I'm happy to give these slides for that. So that's the end of the boring bit. So now we change tack. I haven't shown Tula this because I thought she might like a little surprise. So this is back to Oxford. So this is the Museum of Natural History in Oxford. So we have this amazing sculpture of a COVID thing, which is this is 3D. We're all done in layers, so you could sort of walk around it with amazing views.
That looks fantastic.
Three-dimensional, all in the dark, with all the spikes and so on. All just done on laminated pieces of, I think, perspex or maybe in glass, with lots of layers. So I don't know if it's going to go.
Is it a digital thing?
Well, I think it may have been etched digitally. I mean, it's a real object. Certainly producing it, you could imagine having an etching machine, because all those, each of these layers has the etching on it, and then it's lit up to light up the etched parts. So that's what you're seeing. And then, well, now moving towards Tula, so special Tula colours. So this is now slightly more arty. This is a Tracy Emin exhibit at the National Gallery. I think it's just pre-COVID. But anyway, yes, perhaps we aren't allowed to kiss anymore, but stay safe.
Stay safe.
And I'll hand you over to Tula, who's going to do the more interesting part of the talk.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Jonathan, for presenting what you did. And I decided that for all these different articles that you saw and in the book, I've been inspired to write various poems that relate to this subject matter. And we're at a time when there's this, in the museum world, a huge lacuna, because with museums being closed, maybe they were waiting, that they thought they had time. They didn't really have that much time because other things have moved in and filled that gap, because there's the huge need. And one of those things that's been hugely successful has been the immersive exhibitions, particularly with Van Gogh and now Monet, other artists. And so museums realize that they can't go back to what they were. And I personally think that digital art and education and participation of audiences, this is where I think a lot of new things are going to be happening. So Poems for Digital Art and Life is a collection of poems I now have, going back to actually, I think about 2014 to present. Everything I'm going to read today is pretty much 2020 or 2021. And these relate to these various articles. So for this first poem, COVID Commons, The Dream, you see that I picked this painting by Henri Rousseau, 1910. It was one of his last paintings, as to illustrate something new that's coming up. You might have noticed that now Mark Zuckerberg's animation of a Rousseau jungle painting visualizes the metaverse. This is the next thing upcoming. And so I'm telling you now, time to create your avatar, because everybody's going to have this avatar. There used to be a second life, but now this is going into something quite new. So these poems come out of joy, fear, all these different emotions that people are going through related to this COVID crisis and museums and human relationships. So, alone at home, just my smartphone. What are my choices? TV voices, fake news, that's your muse, Netflix, take your picks. Don't tweet or take the heat. You're in retreat. Escape from Amazon. End the marathon. Ask Google, where's life gone? Mickey and Minnie could be Winnie. A dream sequence with no evidence. Can't get back to reality, stuck in virtuality. Main menu. No venue for physical experience. The materiality of holding hands, kissing, missing you. Okay, next. Okay. Now, converging social and cultural movements. So enter popular culture with the rise of TV, film, and video from the 1960s to today's screen culture. We look at screens 10 to 12 hours per day, some even more than that. So this is a kind of a screen crisis in life. And this image on the screen is a section of a huge work that was displayed at the Whitney Museum as part of an exhibit called Programming. And it's Nam June Paik's 1989 Fin de siècle. And so this poem relates to this notion of the screen. Looking at a screen, silent and unseen, want to scream, can't move, I'm mesmerized, my mind paralyzed, my life unrealized, change the channel, no controller, feels bipolar, activism, passivism, prisms of the mind. I close my eyes, I see your face fading into the past. My cell phone rings, my heart beats fast, wrong number. How long can this last? Drifting into slumber, look away from the screen, dream, dream, dream. Next, please. This isn't what you expected, is it? Now, this is one of my favorites, Inside Art. And this picture is from the one of these Van Gogh immersive exhibitions, La Nuit Étoilée, Starry Night. And it's at the Carrier des Lumières in France. And it was in France that this whole movement started with the Atelier des Lumières in Paris. And it's unexpectedly, at first they thought maybe it's a one-off, but it's taken hold across the entire globe. There are many of these. There are two Van Gogh immersives in New York right now, and it's from Dubai to London to Paris, we have these exhibits. And millions, literally millions of people have gone, and they've paid good money. It's expensive. So museums can learn a lot from this, that audiences are willing to pay for this experience. So they don't just want to come and look, they want an experience. Inside art. I'm inside art, my eyes filled with light of starry night, experiencing Van Gogh's world where images unfurl, my mind expanding, safe landing into virtual reality. Surprised, hypnotized, so close to Van Gogh, don't want to let go. Sharing his life and emotions, mixed reality through digital notions of nature and art, don't want to depart. Van Gogh, you've stolen my heart. Okay. Next, and this is when people leave these exhibits, this is what they express, this is how they feel. So this is a poem that was inspired by one of our articles, but it relates to Alice in Wonderland and going down the rabbit hole. Yes, someone talking to me? Oh, okay. And here on the left, you see an image from a Spanish surrealist painter, Salvador Dali, often juxtapose dream worlds with reality, thus making connections to our post-COVID world at the intersection of reality and digitality. And on the right, you see Alice distorted, kind of morphed identity. And that's from the original 1865. So there's almost 100 years between the Salvador Dali illustrations and the original. The digital abyss. The past fades as we wade deep into a rabbit hole down under the grassy knoll of the digital abyss. Following Alice into Wonderland, take my hand, entering remote identity in virtual reality. It's all a sham, can't recognize where I am. Virtual life seems out of hand. Exhibitions and legacy systems of old traditions falling apart, canceled ambitions, new renditions disappearing, the past, the die is cast, can't hear your voice, no choice, time's run out. So I think the important line here is old traditions falling apart, canceled ambitions. And I think we all kind of feel in this interim stage. Okay, next. Am I doing okay on time?
Excellent.
Okay, good. Here, this is my last slide. Think of life as art. And you can see there's some familiar figures here. Van Gogh, we were just talking about. So this is a poem I just wrote last week. And in some ways you think things are getting better, and then you can get very depressed about what's happening, especially with this new variant on the scene. That was my inspiration. This fear, you're always sort of fearing, oh no, lockdown's coming. COVID's back. We've been hacked. Life under attack. Can't get back to where we were. COVID undeterred. Vision blurred. Morphed reality. More digitality. Protests in the street can't defeat the disease. Freeze, stop, please. Sound the alarm. Can't fight harm with harm. COVID, you've taken my breath. Fearing sudden death. Isolation, no rehabilitation. My heart is broken. No words spoken. Rely on science, not compliance. Bad ideology, no theology, trying to survive, keep freedom alive. End the lockdowns, prisons of the heart. Step back to reality. Think of life as art. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tula. Yes,
Thank you, Tula.
Thank you, Tula, for that very poetic introduction to our afternoon. I expected nothing less. I think it's very interesting that you showed that Van Gogh simulation of Starry Night, because I understand that in France, I mean, the pandemic has prevented me getting there at the moment, but there are exhibitions like that in Paris and at least 2 other locations in France, where even though people can easily go to Quai d'Orsay and see the originals of all these pictures, they in fact flock to see these simulations. I think there's a lot to be learned from that.
I just want to point out one thing, is that they're digital, but they're also physical and sculptural.
Yes.
They have a 3D presence.
Yeah.
And this gives this immersive feeling of being inside art, because you can surround us. It's really a brilliant idea, and it overcomes the fear of doing something with these works that you're not trying to imitate the original, but you're using them as your inspiration. And
I agree.
You're going to see more digital art that taking inspiration. You know, this is I think a pretty.
I agree, Tula. I think there's a lot that can be learned from that, and the fact that they make such a popular exhibition. What I'm going to suggest now is that we go on from your introduction straight away to hear from the artists. The title of a recent paper by Maureen Kendall and Fionn Gunn, the title itself says it all. An exploration of how artists use immersive technologies to promote inclusivity, diversity, and deep public engagement. Note the word deep, I think. Maureen and Fionn have all the in-depth experience necessary to explore digital gallery development and how to build virtual worlds. So Maureen and Fionn, can we hear from you, please? Now, AFRA has put a message which we should all try and obey. when we're not talking, we should turn our microphones off because that will prevent noise interference traveling around. So I'm now going to turn mine off, and Maureen and Fionn should turn theirs on.
Okay, well, mine is on, and I was hoping that you managed to receive our presentation through, because otherwise I'm going to have to do a share screen, and I haven't done that before on Google Meet. So, have you had that?
It's fairly easy if you've got it handy.
Yes, I have. Okay. Right, so how do I do it then?
Bottom middle, there should be a little box with an up arrow in it. So you can
With an
present
up
now.
arrow. Yes.
Not dissimilar to Zoom.
Great. Okay. I'll go with my entire screen, I think. Yeah. And right, so that's a bit tricky because I can't work out. Hang on. Yeah, just a minute.
You need to be displaying it in a window or a screen somewhere.
Right, I've got
select
it.
that.
Yes, but it's not online. Sorry, Maureen, could you give me a hand with this?
Maureen, put your mic on.
Yeah, hang on. It's not, I've got it up, but no. Sorry, can you see this slide now? Hello?
Not yet, no.
All right.
No, we can't see it.
You can see it?
No, we cannot.
Oh, right. Okay. Then I just, yeah, I can't actually do it. Sorry. Well, I mean, in the absence of any visual materials.
There we go.
Oh.
Maureen's presenting it.
Oh, thank God for that. Okay. Right. Just let me get out of this. Okay. So my apologies. And here we are. So Maureen, wonderful. Okay, so if we start right at the very beginning. So so this is us. I mean, we're Amaze Artist Collective, and the project name is Boundless Worlds in Flux. So actually there's another group of artists here who are flux artists. So we're obviously all thinking along the same page. Next, Maureen. Great. And this is the stage we're at the moment, where we've currently got an institutional partner with the Victoria Gallery and Museum, which is at the University of London in Liverpool. But we're looking for other partners on a sort of more global stage as well, because there are lots of interesting, I think, opportunities for us to collaborate. These are our details, and I'll flag them again at the end of the presentation. So next slide. No, maybe it's timed. So really, we've noticed, and this is our group. So we really wanted to go for not just diversity for the sake of diversity, but diversity for the sake of having really different perspectives on things, because this is how you build in resilience. And this is why actually those in the cultural sector that have suffered the worst during COVID, it is because they've been in silos. So we're really getting past that. Next slide, Maureen. And as you can see, we're women-led and we're very diverse. We've got all ages. People are based in different places. We've got one artist in America at the moment, another artist who's living in Paris but is Taiwanese. So we have a common language of English, just about. Next slide, Maureen. And this is just the sort of visuals on the piece that we're working on at the moment. And you can see this is the Boundless Hub, and we'll see more images of this as we move on. Next slide, Maureen. And yes, the collaboration came out of the COVID situation, which, you know, I echo absolutely what Terry said. It was a terrible time, but it was also maybe the best of times. And we did get together in very serious ways and had wonderful and very profound contacts. That's an aerial view of the participant space, which is in our hub. Next slide, Maureen. And these are the kinds of themes that have come up for us, you know, displacement, migration, and this, how we connect the virtual world with the real world. So we're looking at blended experiences. And this is something that we see as the future, in a sense, of that blending of the physical and the intangible. Next, Maureen. There's our hub. And if you keep going quite quickly through these images, Maureen, we'll just write. So we're proposing, at the moment, we're constructing this virtual interactive gallery, and you enter into the hub and you can travel backwards and forwards into different artist spaces, between the spaces, and into a participant space. And this is a key factor for what we're creating, because the participant space is somewhere where you can co-create. And so the visitor enters into our hub. And this is all just being created at the moment. So, I mean, we did all the visuals and the individual artist worlds, but now we're putting it together and building it in Unity. So next slide, great. But along with the actual sort of artist space, gallery, museum, whatever you like to call it, we're also creating a navigational system which can be replicated. So in theory, you could have many different spaces that would use that navigational system. And this is where it could be very interesting for museums as partners. And this is what we're looking at. And these are the sort of, again, we're exploring the planet, ecology, all the sort of zeitgeist themes really are the things that obsess us. And as we're building it in Unity, and of course, because it's a collage of different techniques and technologies, we're encountering all kinds of, you know, basic problems, and we're getting past them. So it's been a great learning experience inside the hub. Yeah, on to the next one, Maureen. And you can see we want to get that texture as well. We don't want just a sort of bland sort of, not necessarily a gaming feel to it. We want to create something that has real sort of a feel for the artist's physical practice as well as their digital practice. Next, yeah. So Maureen, over to you. And, oh, Mike. Right, so this is showing the MVP meetings that we have, where we sit around and we discuss and travel through the spaces and work out how we're going to make them work. Maureen, have you got your mic? No, silent. No, we can't hear you. Okay, do you want to move on then? So this is the theme of Maureen's, and Maureen is very inspired by the sort of pool landscape and the visitor exploring beach, paintings etched into the cliffs with beavers. And of course, that's very much part of sort of climactic restitution, combating the rising sea levels. So if you'd like to move through your images, you can see, and you see the bubbles as well that appear in Maureen's images. That's how you can transition from one space to another. So the visitor, as they approach the bubble, can touch the bubble and move into the artist space as indicated in the icons in the bubble. Okay, next. Great. And so you've got that feeling of landscape moving now into a seascape, underwater scape with Chen Mei-Tsen's work. And again, this is us sitting around working out all the glitches with playing videos in Unity. So next slide. And Mei-Tsen, who is Taiwanese, lives in Paris and sees herself as a bit of a nomad as well. And so very much connects with the whole jellyfish theme, which again has big sort of climate links as well. Next, Maureen. And we travel through Mei-Tsen's space, and she's got 3 identical spaces with all the videos running of the jellyfish. And she's chosen red, blue, and black to immerse the visitor. All the little bubbles can be accessed, and the viewer can move in different ways. This is the space that I've created. And you can see we're all sitting around having a look at that. And that caused headaches because it was imported from Tiltbrush and had to be optimized, and it was crazy. So next slide, Maureen. So yes, so I've created this helter-skelter, lots of different helter-skelters that intersect. The voyage of discovery is for the visitor to go around. Sometimes they reach a point where they can read a story, or they can listen to something, or they see an exhibition within the rocks. So it's very much a mixture of all different kinds of media together. Next. Okay, Maureen. Yep. And so these are the images of my space with a central planet in the middle. Right. And now we're on to Nazia Parvez, who is of Pakistani origin, brought up in Britain and lives in America now, works there. And she was very much inspired by an artist who brought an actual wheat field to New York back in the 80s. So if we go to the next slide. So her title is Displacement. And it is this idea, the visitor traveling through the wheat and almost feeling the wheat in your face as you're passing through, because they're moving. And so it's that strange mix of something that is so rural in the middle of an urban environment. Next, Maureen.
Fionn, I just want to hold you for 1 second, because I've got to ask Afra a question. Afra, are you okay to stay until 6:10? Oliver?
Yes, that is fine,
Yeah.
Terry.
I
Yes.
know, the thing is, I know you're not going to stay. Sorry, I just wanted to check, Fionn.
Sure, no problem at all. No problem.
Please continue. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll move on. Sorry, yeah, great. So you get it's the early stages. This is Terry Broughton. She was the youngest artist in the group, and she's created, again, using different kinds of technology. So Nazi has been using Photoshop and Unity. Terry's been using Maya. I've been using Tiltbrush. Maureen's been using Unity. So it's a complete blend of different things. And hers is an underwater scene. So again, we sort of keep coming back to these themes of water and movement, and the natural sort of life cycle. So yeah, she's got an underwater scene, and we see, and I apologize for the quality of the images. We've had problems with navigating her space and taking photographs and getting them to the right people, but it gives you a sort of an idea of what she's trying to create. That fish in the background chases another one and eats it, you know. So on to the next one. And here's the participant space. And so we thought we'd create, and again, this is created in Tiltbrush, a forest of transformation. So we can move on, Maureen, and look at the space. So in this forest of trees, and we're building in the interactions at the moment, it'll be very simple to start with, but as the visitor moves through, they can change the colors of the trees and the landscape that surrounds them. So they go from spring, summer, winter, autumn, and can travel around. And we will add in much greater complexity later. At the moment, we'll have sound triggers as well, bird song, things like this, but in quite a subtle and gentle way. And eventually, we hope that this space here will be one where visitors can actually make stuff. They can make their own trees. They can make their trees blossom. They can do all kinds of things.
I think, Fionn, if you wouldn't mind, we should conclude soon.
Of course. And so this is it. We'd love you to contact us. Next slide.
Okay.
We've got lots of educational perspectives on what we're doing, and our contact details again.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you. Well, those images were absolutely wonderful. And I think you've proved the point very adequately that visitors don't expect a simulation of a gallery visit on screen.
Yeah.
They're looking for something much more, something which can take them to a more illusionary set of places. And you've proved that very beautifully, Fionn. As you say, it's an amazing set of work. I'm moving now, continuing with our artists who are gathered here together. I'm moving on to Oliver Gingrich and Afra Shemza. And they are the two founders, or two of the three founders, of Flux Artists, which is a forum for pioneering new media artists in the UK and further afield. In other words, you can tell from what Bjorn has said and what Ashley is now going to talk about, that there's a number of these collectives that are beginning to produce work for what I will call the new heritage age. I've attended many events put on by Flux, and they're always absolutely intriguing. And I think it's best that I don't talk much about them now, but I have asked Afra and Oliver to talk very specifically about the research work they're doing with National Gallery X in London, because it's all pointing to the fact that it's not just artists that are moving to the future. Some of our institutes and museums have already taken note of the fact that they've got to change, that they're not just keepers of art, as traditionally they thought their role was, but they're now sharers of art. And who better to talk about this than Afra and Oliver? Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much, Terry. Yeah, thank you for the introduction. It was also great to hear from Fionn and Maureen, to hear about their work with Amaze and to see some of these beautiful images. Yeah, my name is Olive Gingrich. I'm co-founder of Art in Flux. I'm a media artist myself and a researcher. I'm focusing on mixed reality, visual sound, and neuro art in my practice. And here you can see some images of my work. Together with the art collective Analemma Group, I'm focusing specifically on visual sound. And as a researcher, I'm investigating participatory art practices at the National Center for Computer Animation at Bournemouth University. I'm working at Greenwich University and at Roehampton University. And I've just received an HIC research grant to continue this work on participatory art practices further. So yeah, but for those of you who don't know Flux, we were founded in 2016 by the artist Maria Almena, Afra Shamsa, who is here today, and myself, and we're an artist-led community interest company. So we're specifically focusing on artists working on the intersection between art and technology. We founded Flux as a platform for artists, by artists for artists, and we've grown from 30 artists initially into 2,000 plus practicing artists from various different fields, all working with different technologies. And what we've tried to do with Art in Flux is to create a platform ready for media artists to work with larger institutions also. I mentioned we've been working with the National Gallery quite a bit, and we'll tell you a bit about the events that we've been putting on with National Gallery X specifically. Yeah, I'd like to share briefly some of the other events that we're doing with Flux over the course of the year. So the socials are our more intimate, more supportive environments for our media arts community. They're focusing on networks and collaboration and the mutual support network. And we have larger curated talk events that allow us to bring some of the key themes in the media arts to the general public. And for these events, we've initially partnered with organizations such as the Royal College of Art, EVA London, Central St. Martin's, and EVA London. And now I'm going to hand over to Afra Shamsa to tell you a bit more about the work we've been doing with Art in Flux and National Gallery X.
Hi everybody, it's really great to be here. Hope that you can hear me. It's a bit tricky sharing slides and muting and unmuting, so hopefully you'll shout at me if there's anything wrong. I'm Afra Shamsa. I am a multimedia artist and director and curator at Art in Flux as well. You can see some of my works here on the slides. I have a keen interest in modernism, my Islamic cultural heritage, creating art for all, and advocating for a more sustainable practice. So just to continue our little introduction about Art in Flux, last year we were honoured to confirm the National Gallery X as our partner for our larger curated talks events. In 2020, we curated 3 events focused on gender, health and well-being, and heritage. And this year, we've actually created 4 events for the National Gallery: Reclaimed, which we'll go into a bit more, The Invisible, Transcendence, and Radical Ecology. And all our past events can be found on our website, and also the National Gallery website too. And we can share a link in the chat for that. We also run workshops, and we've been expanding to do online workshops, so artists teaching other artists or the public about how to create light sculptures, painting with code, and creating wearable tech, etc. And Flux also creates and curates exhibitions. So we profile groundbreaking media artists, and our first exhibition in 2018 turned into a bit of a small festival. And in 2019, we co-curated the Event 2 exhibition in collaboration with the Computer Art Society and EVA London and the Royal College of Art. I'm now going to hand back over to Olive, who will talk a little bit more about Gender Tuck, which is an event that we did with the National Gallery, and then we'll talk about Reclaimed. Oh, I think you're on mute, Olive, love.
Thank you. Sorry, my bad. So yeah, I was just about to say that Gender Tech was our very first online exhibition, and it plays into what Terry was saying before about the need really to create completely different experiences. So this was our first foray, and we really wanted to specifically profile underrepresented groups in the media arts, including the LGBTQIA community. And with Gender Tech, we discussed gender in the context of new media, profiling diverse artists from within the spectrum. So we showed work by Jake Alves, Go Greengrass, Paul Kinsley, Priscilla Burrell, Brigitte Hosier, some others that you can see here. And it was really successful, both as a talk, but also as a gallery, as an online gallery. But we also had to feel that we needed to do more and to really bring this virtual space to life. And that's what we've been doing with Reclaimed, really. So back over to you, Afa.
Thank you, Olive. So Reclaimed celebrates some of the most radical and innovative media artists of our times. We're showcasing artists from the underrepresented spectra of society, an eclectic avant-garde of diversity, featuring women in tech, LGBTQIA+, and neurodiverse artists. So the exhibition and event was curated by the three Art in Flux co-founders, Olive Gingrich, Maria Almina, and myself. And the exhibition featured 12 artists from the Art in Flux community. The show provides a virtual space for the visibility of diverse voices within the media arts. And globally accessible, it's really highlighting the eclectic and vibrant diversity. So it can certainly be said, and I know that we're talking a lot about institutions today, that potentially institutions within the UK lack quite a lot where equal representation is taken into account. Very few minority ethnic groups are represented in their collections, programming and exhibitions, and even in their staff members. But things are changing, and institutions have had a really tough challenge with the pandemic happening, because it's hard for larger cultural institutions to change and adapt quickly, and that was really what was needed in the pandemic. And so for institutions like the National Gallery to work with an artist-led organisation like us has been a really great way of being able to offer virtual and online programme. So with Art in Flux, being artist-led, we're a very sort of small organisation, so we are quite autonomous, and we can adapt and change to the current climate that we find ourselves in from month to month. And so I think the collaboration between institutions and artists is a really exciting and really necessary one to kind of push innovative ideas out there. So for Reclaimed, we created a virtual exhibition environment, and we borrowed some elements from the different institutions. So we stole the British Museum's glass roof, which we created as a dome in our virtual exhibition space. And we placed our exhibition in Trafalgar Square outside the National Gallery in a 360 image. So you could see the National Gallery there. And what we were doing was reclaiming public and institutional spaces for our media artists. So we focused on exhibiting neurodiverse artists such as Natasha Trotman. She exhibited Neuro-Mnemonic, which was an interactive film work that explored the borderlands between the mainstream and neurodivergent intangible spaces. And we also exhibited Aminda Verdi's work, who presented Exomatic Echoes, which was based on scans of her own medical data. We championed women in tech as well. So Camille Baker's work, Into Her, explores the internal worlds in context of post-reproductive diseases and the pain experienced by women over 40. In Daniel Braithwaite Shirley's interactive work, We Are Here Because of Those That Are Not, the artist that has archived the existence of a group of Black trans people to highlight their lived experience. And this is shown as an interactive game that you can take part in. In Roe Greengrass and Maddie James's Down There the Sea Folk Lives, the artists explore male trans experiences in their film about gender transitioning and singing voices. And I'll now pass over to Olive, who'll introduce some of his work.
Yeah, so what was really exciting about Reclaimed was that the majority of the work was really interactive. And so you had this online space that you could traverse and that you can navigate, but then you also have 360.
Olive, sorry to interrupt. I had a request. It was on the chat.
Yes.
Would you mind speaking just a little more slowly?
Slowly.
Of the Brazilian people. Thank you.
Okay, absolutely. Yes, I
Thank
will
you very
talk
much.
slowly.
Sorry
So,
to interrupt.
No problem at all. Yeah, so what we try to do with Reclaimed is really to create a space that you can explore and navigate through. And we featured 360 interactive artwork as much as other interactive artworks. One of these was The Pantheon of Queer Mythology by Enrique Agudo. He narrated the stories of 4 deities representing existing issues for queer people in Western societies today. These issues might go unnoticed or are overlooked by mainstream culture, and here you can explore these interactively. And in Sharma Raman and my artwork, we explore gender fluid bodily experiences, abstracted as a continuously changing representation of flow mental states. Here we see a 3D body scan that is then deformed and abstracted using brainwaves, in this case our own brainwaves, that are basically distorted and then featured and can be experienced in Reclaimed. Afra, back over to you.
Thanks, Olive. We, the Art in Flux co-founders, we also represented our work as part of the exhibition. So in mine and Stuart Batchelor's project, Shemza Digital, we asked the public to become actively involved in art making by creating their own digital paintings. And we also have invited the public to actually display and exhibit their work in our virtual space, so reclaiming these spaces for public participation. Chematica's art piece, which is by Maria Almina, who's our 3rd founder, Transcendence. It was an interdisciplinary art research project exploring how live performance and interactive technologies can induce altered states of consciousness.
Yeah, and finally in Zeitgeist, which is an artwork by myself and Sharma Raman, and we use deep learning algorithms to indicate flow mental states that are basically states of heightened creativity to turn the artwork into an interface of creative collaboration. Flow can be simulated, and here you can both experience it as a 360 artwork, but you can also hear it and listen to it. So with Reclaimed, we wanted to show diversity across the media arts, focusing on diverse underrepresented groups. Yeah, we would like to thank Christopher McInnes, who was the designer of the virtual space, for his work in designing the exhibition, and of course all of our fantastic artists for contributing.
So Reclaimed, oh, I'm not sure why that's white. Okay, great, we've got it. Reclaimed was represented as it was launched at the National Gallery X in our Reclaimed Talks event, where we invited 3 of the artists to come along and speak about their work. And it was also presented at the Kensington and Chelsea Art Week and Ars Electronica Festival as well. So it's been doing the tours this year, which is great. And we're going to be continuing this theme of featuring and representing underrepresented groups at EVA London next year, where we're going to be having a physical exhibition at the British Computer Society. So that's really exciting, and we'll keep you posted about that. And we can leave it there, I think, and we'll drop some links in the chat so you can actually see more about the Reclaimed exhibition. There's a lovely video that we did, which is like a tour of it. So we'll do that now.
Thank you, Olive and Afra. I wondered if I could just ask you a question. It's about National Gallery X, what are their ultimate ambitions? Because I mean, they're doing a lot of work through you and others at researching new techniques of illusionary places to display artworks, not just new media artworks, but traditional artworks too. Where are they hoping to go as a result of this work?
It's always hard to speak for third parties who are not present. I think Ali Husseini, the co-director of National Gallery X, would probably love to answer this question directly. But my feeling is that National Gallery X was really set up with this remit to explore the collection of the National Gallery through new technology and also through the eyes of new generation of media artists. So there's really this these two aspects to create an online and digital studio as much as a physical recontextualization of the collection at the National Gallery. Afra, maybe you want to add something to this?
Do you see
Yeah,
them?
so maybe we didn't.
Sorry, Afra, carry on.
Oh, sorry. Maybe we didn't say too much about exactly how we work with the National Gallery for the curated talks events, which I think is kind of interesting. So the National Gallery have a large collection of artworks, and when we're curating our talks, we're looking at their historical works and looking for connections and links between curatorial connections and links between their collection and maybe things that we're exploring, themes that we're exploring within our work as contemporary artists. And then it's Flux's sort of responsibility rather than our artist speakers. We invite our artist speakers to come along, tell everybody about their work. And we also give the context of the National Gallery's collection. So it kind of, so we're thinking about, so I just curated an event called Radical Ecology. And so I was looking at artists who have been inspired by the environment. So Turner, for example, and then thinking about sort of Monet's immersive watercolors with the, sorry, not watercolors, water lilies, and how you can think of kind of immersive displays and those kind of ideas. So you get a bit of a sense there in terms of practically how we connect the National Gallery's collection and to contemporary artists working today. But you can see lots of the videos and things of those events on there.
It's interesting you mentioned Monet's water lilies, because I read in The Guardian only the other day that in Toronto there is an illusory representation of water lilies, of Monet's water lilies, in a gallery there. Ricardo, I know you're from Montreal rather than Toronto, but have you discovered what that Toronto exhibit is all about?
No, not really. I cannot tell you about that. Sorry.
Okay, don't worry. It's just that I happened to pick it up the other day and I thought, well, there's a theme happening here. I mean, I think what we've heard from our artists so far shows that there is a definite direction, and it's much more significant than that. It shows, I think, just the beginning of the ascendancy of what I call new media art. I know sometimes you just call it media art, but I use the word new media art. There is an ascendancy, which there needs to be, because of course the traditional gallery can't really cope with it. And even the Turner Prize, the UK's main sort of prize in the art world, this year, every award was made to collectives of artists. Very interesting fact, is it not? You could imagine that it could be an award made to Flux or to Amaze perfectly well, and you would have every chance of winning the Turner Prize. I suggest you go in for it next year. I'm going to move fast because I told you time would catch up with us, and it is doing just that. We'll now move to Dr. Leela Moore. Now, her work focuses on the convergence of digital technologies and consciousness through emerging art forms. In other words, she's putting another slant on what Afra and Olive and Maureen and Fionn have already presented to us. She's going to discuss Year Zero, museums as technoetic time machines. Now, by Year Zero, she means the pandemic outbreak, and I'll leave her to explain the term technoetic time machines. Leela, over to you. Oh, microphone on, please, Leela. Microphone on. Microphone on. Leela? Microphone on.
Do you see my slides?
Lovely, lovely. Thank you.
Yes?
Yes, we saw a slide and we heard your voice.
Okay, so you see the slides.
Yes,
Okay.
that's it. We've got a slide.
Fine. Okay, 1 second, please.
Please go. Yep, good.
Okay, so hello, I'm an artist, filmmaker, and screen choreographer. I'm also a lecturer and theorist, specializing in technoetic arts. I also teach on online academic MSc programs via the Aleph Trust and Liverpool John Moores University. The term year zero derives from a series of videos that I made in response to the corona pandemic during lockdown and which were shown in exhibitions created by FEM meeting women in art, science, and technology, such as Acquired Immunity and the FEM meeting Garden in Ars Electronica, Lisbon. I perceive year zero as the year that marks the corona pandemic outbreak. Our post-corona age is not entirely free of the COVID virus that continues to mutate via endless variants, and like a virus, art and design should mutate as well into numerous nodes and variations. In a year zero's video, I suggest that the fear of the virus is similar to the fear of radical innovations and of any form of other. However, since year zero, we are pushed to think more and more outside the establishment box. In this case, the box could be a museum or an art gallery. Regardless of the existential fear of extinction that the pandemic engenders, we are compelled to think about the transmission of viral concepts. Moreover, as the world of human culture seems to be shifting, our perception of cultural heritage and historical time is shifting as well. The shift, which is digitally and technologically based and orientated via telematic systems, coincides with a cognitive shift, a global mind shift. As many artists, theorists, philosophers, and lay people noted, the corona altered the perception of time and space through social distancing and intensive exposure to and participation in the experience of telepresence and cyberception. Finally, the theories of cyberspace pioneers have been fully embodied experientially by all those who have internet access wherever they are in the world. 2 years after the corona outbreak, most people are ready for the next stage of cultural transmission and reception via digital technologies and mixed reality situations involving physical and virtual level of experience. Thus, it seems inevitable to return to the technoetic notion of the museum or the gallery as brain, mind, or consciousness. During my reflection on year zero, I returned to Mary Shelley's novel, The Last Man. Lionel, the novel's protagonist, is possibly the last man on Earth after a pandemic brought an end to most of humanity in 2100. Interestingly, Lionel spends many lonely days pondering about the remains and preservation of the world's cultural heritage. He leaves a message to an unknown future, which we can still receive 195 years after the publication of the book. Thinking ahead, who will pick up our messages or observe our cultural heritage in the year 2121? Unlike Lionel's historical era, our culture Our culture possesses complex tools and immersive technologies, but like Lionel, it may be wiser to think about the future now. Traditionally, museums are storage houses for historical time and memory. The concept of the museum as a time machine includes both poles of past and future, with year zero as a metaphor for the present moment, the starting point of any experience of culture in space and time. The idea of a museum as a time machine recycles and extends the potential for a wormhole space-time tunnel experience of art and culture, a notion initially experimented with in All in Space by Sherry Rabinovich and Keith Galloway, and envisioned and speculated by Roy Ascott in his paper, The Mind of the Museum. Fast forward to the present, our digital technologies, including artificial intelligence, are becoming so powerful that we need to be cautious about their ethical applications, which could have severe consequences on definitions and representations of cultural heritage. However, the fact that digital technologies and telematics are globally connected and currently shared like never before makes it not only possible, but also logical to think of the museum or the gallery as a brain or mind that is constantly active, responsive, interactive, and evolving. The Kima Color Project is a project that I really thought is in sort of stepping this right direction, because I encounter videos by Kima in various digital online exhibitions, which extended the video's cultural reach beyond their point of origin in the National Gallery's collections and paintings. I suggest developing further the interrelations between museums, artifacts, and collections, allowing access to more digital artists, designers, curators, to form creative interactions that could add digital layers, links, and nodes to any museum, extending its scope in time and space and allowing it to be constantly evolving. The museum can thereby contain within its existing geographically based cultural structures units that would function as mini wormholes that would allow telematic tunnels to form by connecting not only historical time, past with present, but potential futures via the perpetual interaction of different artists and their participating viewers. I have referred to Tula Gineni in another conference paper, an academic article, in relation to the positive shift triggered by the Me Too movement and overall by what she calls real places of the mind that that have the potential to allow unrepresented women artists and other marginal groups to become more involved and exhibit the work. In my previous 2019 EVA paper, I proposed that some ancient tombs and museums are essentially technoetic time machines. They harness techniques and technologies to record, preserve, and demonstrate cultural and aesthetic experience by interacting with our perception and cognition of time. In fact, I presented a few proposals in different stages of progress for creative in various venues for creative interaction with museum artifacts and collections. And also there is the cyber performance component that I am currently I'm returning to via the Upstage platform, which is another exciting opportunity to link museums, galleries, and with remote performers and performances. So this is really something that I'm going to be concentrating in the near future, also working with my students. So, so the question is, how can you or we make such collaboration happen or foster them, these wonderful collaborations between artists, collectors, museums, and their collections? That's when we think,
Leela, are you happy with just a few minutes more?
yeah, I'm almost finished. Yes, I'm fine. I'm just
try and wind up now if you can.
I am. This is exactly what I'm doing.
Thank you. Thank
This
you.
is my last slide.
Don't worry.
That's when we think of the future, we already expect it to become the past. Moreover, our existential challenge to last forever as cultures in a post-corona world presents creative opportunities which correspond with a post-corona zeitgeist. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Leela, for that. I very much like your ideas, museum as mind, which I believe you're saying will provide an enhanced experience from both a participatory point of view and apparitional point of view. I mean, I think you're posing a huge technological challenge there to make that a reality.
Yes, but I think that we already have some realistic and possible ways to go about it. Really.
I agree.
Yeah, and this is the next stage. We just need to be able to make these collaborations happen.
Yeah. Thank you very much. If I'm right, Moshe Kane, who was going to be our next speaker, is not here. I'm just going to.
Why do you say that I'm not here, Terry? Why do you say that I'm not here?
Oh, you're not. You are here.
I'm very much
sorry.
here. Very much so.
I didn't see the name. You see, that was my problem. I now understand. So Moshe, I'm so glad to see you. Thank you very much.
Same here.
I was going to introduce you just a little bit, because really following Leela's talk, I think it's time, and the challenge she poses to technology, it's time to move on from our artists. Just to touch on the subject of the sort of technological challenges that now we're all faced with. So I think this is where your specific expertise come in. In other words, your digital imaging and the presentation of tangible cultural heritage. You really are forging new methods of, in fact, investigating archaeological sites, for instance, and without actually the messy and sweaty digging process, I believe your imaging techniques will create an illusion without necessarily disturbing actual things in situ. But I'm going to leave you to explain that very interesting concept.
Well, thank you very much, Terry, and thanks everybody. Yes, now for something kind of completely different, to quote a phrase. I'm not an artist and I don't represent a museum, though I have been working with cultural heritage institutions for well over 35 years. Academically and professionally, I'm involved in conservation imaging for art, for architecture, archaeology, etc. Now, usually in EVA meetings, which I've attended for some 20 years, if not more, hello, James. Usually in such meetings, I present some project or another that I'm working on, but today is going to be different. In the context of today's meeting, I'd like to chat with you.
Good.
Not to show slides, to think aloud, to pick up on the challenge and relate to the title of this meeting. and to reflect on the way that I see possible way forward for cultural institutions and for academia in a post-pandemic world. I'd like to talk about what I personally regard as a potential positive shift in our collective mindset, which may, hopefully, take place in the wake of COVID. I'm talking about a shift in our focus from me to us, from insularity to diversity, from local to global, from issues affecting our own close circle, our group, our society, our institutions, our country, our religion, to those of the collective, to the world as a whole. The world has shrunk, and that's not new. I think it was 1964 when Marshall McLuhan spoke of the global village. We know it, we've known it for a long, long time, but I'm not sure that it has ever really sunk in that we are all connected at the hip and that we must join forces in order to bring about change, indeed, in order to survive. We like to defend our secrets and our intellectual property behind firewalls and lawyers. We defend our borders with tanks and even with nuclear weapons. Yet all it takes is one little Chinese bat to break down our defenses. All it takes is one little Swedish girl to point out that the emperor is actually not wearing any clothes. All it takes is one tragic event to spark off global protest. Me Too, Black Lives Matter, etc. For decades, we've neglected and played down the warnings of global war, of economic bullying by the richer nations, of material waste, of climate change, CO2 emissions, and lately, of the dire prophecies of the medical profession in the wake of conspiracy theories. However, the past few years have brought home the message with such a vicious intensity that we can no longer ignore it. This double blow of, on the one hand, the pandemic, along with the unprecedented growing rate of natural disasters, have all sent a message that can no longer be ignored. And the message is, we are in this together. Together we rise, and together we fall. And it's not just our health, our environment, our lives that are in danger, so too is our cultural heritage. And if we don't join hands to work together, we are lost, and so is our heritage. Now, at the same time, it's not all doom and gloom. I think something good is happening also. We are all social creatures. We like our conferences, we like our meetings and our discussions. As an educator, I've always preferred the physical face-to-face meeting, as I believe do we all. However, the mindset shift that I am talking about and that I mentioned earlier is very apparent in the use of our online communication tools for meetings, for teaching, for conferences, Zoom, Google Meet, and so on. We no longer regard them as strange and awkward. We've learned not just to accept them, but also to use them to our advantage. Take this meeting, for example. A short while ago, it may have been impossible to arrange and carry out an international meeting such as this in such a short time. This would have most probably taken weeks, if not months, rather than days. Now, a case in point, which some of you here in the audience are familiar with. Some years ago, I proposed to my college to establish an international course on digital imaging for heritage conservation. Everything was in place. We had a syllabus, timetables, teachers. However, it was ultimately deemed impractical, non-feasible, and it fell through. Then along came COVID, and the impossible became possible. The non-feasible became perfectly practical. And in fact, exactly 2 months ago, we launched a course, a 19-week course with 19 different lectures from Israel and Europe, including some who are here amongst us this evening, and some 50 students from all over the globe: Germany, Italy, England, the USA, Turkey, Cyprus, Holland, Norway, Israel, Argentina, Ukraine, even New Zealand. Now, the exchange of viewpoints, the multiplicity of cultural backgrounds, histories, religions, and the diverse breadth of knowledge that such a course is bringing out weekly could never have been matched by a narrow, localized one, however good it may be. Therefore, I believe and hope that even if, and hopefully when, this plague passes over us, that things will not return to what they were before. I truly hope that we may learn the power and the advantage of talking as we rather than as me. That sharing knowledge freely and using the technology at our disposal for that purpose is a gift that we shouldn't lose. This message is relevant, in my opinion, to all, to museums, to academia, and to all institutions who believe in spreading knowledge and in the common course of safeguarding our tangible cultural heritage. That is all I wish to say, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. I'm glad you have introduced a note of great optimism. I thought you probably would, by the way, because that's my feeling too, that as time goes on, things will actually improve because of this rather difficult period that we've all been through. You've proved it in the case of your own activities at your Hadassah Academy in Jerusalem. But I think in all our different ways, we are beginning to see a blue sky some way ahead with the sun shining there. It's no longer going to be foggy all the time. And no longer is it foggy in London, by the way. It's all changed.
It's raining here today.
Clean air. So I think we'll take your message to heart. One point. How do you see EVA doing something about it?
Oh, that's a good question, Terry. We've discussed this in the past on many occasions, haven't we? Haven't really yet reached. Well, I'm going to branch away now from kind of the theoretical and the ethical, and let's talk practical.
Yeah.
And I think the answer lies in Erasmus+, if you're familiar with it. And I assume most of you are. The EU initiatives for collaboration between institutions and academia. I personally have got rather involved in it in the last few months.
Okay.
And I know, again, I think very much in wake of what's been happening the world over, and this feeling which I didn't invent, I think it is there, that we have to kind of come together, and that the technology has become such that there's absolutely no reason not to. Mm-hmm. Admittedly, I mean, I missed the glass of wine at the end of the evening, but I can do that at home also. But so I think that institutions or organizations like the Erasmus Plus or the Tempus European Union organizations, which support both financially and logistically collaborative interactions between organizations, institutions, primarily academia, but not just. I think that is the way that we have to push forward. We discussed this at the time, and I'm personally pursuing it at the moment in a very active way. And I very much hope and believe that maybe we will be able to get the support to kind of bring EVA into this as part of the whole support system, and not just kind of have this framework of EVA conferences, but actual workshops where we can all get together, preferably physically, I mean, very much so, following this international course that we're running at the moment, which is going to take some 4 months, we're hoping very much to put together a conference on the same topic. And I would like it to be a physical conference and not a digital one. Have it in Jerusalem and kind of mix in with lots of practical tours and so on and so forth. So I'm extending an invitation, and I know that people like Susan, who is here, and Dov, I noticed also amongst us here,
Yes.
will all support such an initiative.
Thank you, Moshe. I'm going to stop myself asking you further questions because I've got my eye on the time, as you know, and Ricardo has been waiting very patiently. He's come all the way. He's come all the way from Montreal, and I'm delighted to see him here. Ricardo and I first met one another in Brasilia. Now, I'm harking back to those grand old days now, when we went to conferences and we flew all over the world. And I've met Ricardo in Brasilia, in Colombia, and more mundanely, Plymouth, UK. But that does prove a point, doesn't it? The Brasilia conference was all about visual music, which is my particular form of new media art. It's the reason why I am, along with Afra and Olive, I'm a flux artist, and my medium is making music visual. Some people believe in that as an ambition. I do fervently, and some people don't. Now, Ricardo, I won't say any more. That's just how we first met. Since then, you've been responsible for a huge number of events, balanced, unbalanced conferences being only 2 of them, or 3 of them, or 4 of them. Please take the stage for a moment.
Thank you so much, Terry. I'm very glad to be here. Well, let me share the screen. Let's see if I can do it. Yes, let's go. I hope you can see it now, right?
Yep.
I think that this time I'm not going to talk about visual music, and I'm not going to talk about balance and balance. That is usually about electronic media arts and the environment. But I'm thankful that my colleague presenting just a few minutes before, I think that at the end of this presentation, we're going to see that there are some connections, I hope. I mean, but I'm going to talk about something I'm not usually talking about, but yes, I'm used to live I'm living in Canada. I'm from Argentina, but I'm now in Colombia because I needed to take some air and I came here. So, well, why I'm saying that? Because I think that the international perspective, I mean, different views are very important for these questions that you were posing, Terry. I mean, when I was reading this in a post-pandemic world, what happens to culture? Cultural institutions face new opportunities for advancement or suffer decline. Well, we are not completely sure, but I think that there will be a mix of things. I mean, with things up and down. But what I really think is that this is an opportunity to make some maybe small changes, like my colleague was saying, going from our to collective. So I started to think about the links between museums and power and politics. And I started to look and search things about museums and power and museums and politics, etc., etc. And I found that most of the material I was finding on the web were coming from certain countries. So I found a lot of material like what is the future of the museum, what is the future of museums, again, Center for the Future of Museums, and more and more and more. Then I found this publication from Portugal talking about museum discourse and power. This is from a few years ago. Throughout their history, museums have established discourses about the cultural significance of their collections to the selection, reception, classification, cataloging, and exhibition of objects. These discourses were, and still are, determinant for the creation of collective memories, as well as for establishing the ways in which societies deal with the past in the present. And my main point here is they also contribute actively to shape social, moral, political, and ideological values. By doing so, museums were and are not only institutions of power, but also instruments of power. So still looking around, I was finding more and more and more about what is the future of museums. And this is from this year, for example, February of 2021. And then I found this from the Journal of Museum Ethnography saying, there is nothing new about museums having political implications. The first public museum opened amidst heated debates regarding democratic access to valuable collections. However, increasingly museums have become one of the arenas, or in some instances, battlegrounds for debates regarding cultural representation. Why I'm bringing this? Because I think that, of course, I mean, museums and what we hear more and more and more about post-colonialism and what will happen in the future, I think that the situation is clearly different in places like certain countries of Europe, North America, and it's different like in places like Latin America in general and many other places around the world. I'm mentioning Latin America because I'm going to give an example. My example is, who knows the Museum of Tomorrow? Well, I'm not going to wait for the answer now, but I mean, I took this picture in Rio de Janeiro a few years ago, and this is an unbelievable museum in Rio. My point is, would it be the same if this museum were in Paris, London, Rome, Los Angeles, Berlin, New York City? I mean, why we know about certain things happening in certain places and we have no idea about certain things happening in other places? So if we take some of these just definitions I found in the web about the policy of, I mean, this is about colonialism and imperialism. For example, a policy or ideology of extending the rule over people and other countries, for extending political and economic access, power and control, often through employing hard power, but also soft power. So my point basically is these are also all photos from the Museum of Tomorrow, the Museo de Amanhã in Rio de Janeiro. So my point is, yes, about people coming back to museum or other ways of presenting what we usually have in a museum. But what I'm doing here is not a complaint. It's an observation, and maybe I could call it an invitation, because I think that there are more than one way of understanding the world and life, more than one cosmology. I learned that directing projects in Cusco, for example, in Peru, or the consideration of a transdisciplinary approach. What this means is basically that if this museum would be probably in another capital, in some places in the world, will be as known as the Eiffel Tower. But I don't know how many of the people who is not from Brazil knows a place like this, or at least a photo of this place, or what it means, this place. So this is just an example of what I find, how things are working. And I think we have an opportunity to make changes. So in a post-pandemic world, I would hope that, for example, not only before colonialism was in a certain way. Today, there are a lot of people talking about post-colonialism, but what is surprising to me is that most of the things I'm reading about post-colonialism are coming from the same people that before were doing colonialism. So why not other people talk, especially the people colonized for so many years, why cannot show what the situation was and is, so we can show and share and become, maybe from our to the collective, places like this one that we are showing here, and many other things from cultural heritage. So that's all I want to say, and I hope this will be some kind of contribution and we can consider this perspective.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. It's interesting that I know that Museum of Tomorrow in Rio, and it's a very good, it's a museum which poses a question. Should it exist or shouldn't it? Because it's not saying all that much, and it's a massive structure saying it. In other words, almost too much has been put into the. I'm speaking as an architect shouldn't, by the way. And the opposite extreme in Rio is the Crafts Museum. I think it's called CRAB, which I'm sure you know well, Ricardo. And that is a wonderful museum. That teaches you everything about Brazil. Wonderful. And it teaches you through folk art. Just like the Santa Fe Museum of Folk Art teaches you about folk art throughout the world. Alexander Girard's collection. I wouldn't want to lose those sort of museums for the world. They are wonderful. Now, I've been very unfair on our last speaker. I think he's probably going to accept his lot. Professor Ernest Edmonds from De Montfort University in the UK. Now, we all know he has an encyclopedic knowledge on computer and digital art. And of course, he practices that art himself to great acclaim. And I've heard him speak on the subject in Hong Kong and London, and now in Sao Paulo. But we're not asking him to speak on this subject today, but he can if he feels like, because he doesn't have to do what I say, but I'm giving him the unenviable task, if he wants to take it, of making some sense of what's happened so far this afternoon or this evening in this madly diverse EVA International Session. So, Ernest, would you mind picking up the reins at this point and either say exactly what you'd like to say about anything, or possibly try and find common denominators between what you've heard today?
Thank you, Terry. What I'd like to do is say a few things about culture and museums in the post-pandemic world in the context of what we've just heard. We've heard so many interesting things, and I've written down so many lovely phrases that matter a lot to me. But maybe I can give an overview, coming at it from this point of view, which is something that's not been said, which is this, that, well, the culture isn't changing so much, it's the museums that are changing more. Most of what we've been talking about has been work that has been going on all the time, but is now much more prominent than it was before the pandemic. So in a way, what's happening is there's a change in the cultural context in which we're all working. Well, what I've seen all of my life is that when new technologies appear, the old models are implemented in the new technologies. And it takes quite a long time before people start to take real advantage of those new technologies. And I think we can see, and people have mentioned this already, that very often the museums are not really taking full advantage of everything that they could. Fortunately, today, we've heard quite a few examples of people taking great advantage of the new technologies in the new world we're in. How can this be done? Well, the most important thing to most of us here, I think, is that the new media art, I'll use that phrase, Terry, I don't know, you perhaps prefer me to say the media art. Some people prefer to say the digital art, but the new media art is much more accepted by the museums, who suddenly feel that they have to engage with it because we're in, quotes, a new media world. And so many opportunities have arisen that were not there before. And lots of things are happening in that front. And it's thrilling to hear of many of those examples that we've heard today. What are some of the characteristics that we've heard about that matter most? And these are characteristics that are kind of new to this world. Well, participation by the public, participative art,
collaboration, being together, making things together. These are attributes that we see today that were not there really in the museums of the past very much. And let me just make a few examples, because maybe before I do that, I should say one thing, that we have the new art and the new activities and the new design methods relating to the new technology, but the museums still have the duty to hold, present, and make available the old, right? So that, how do they do that? And how is that enhanced by the new technology? Actually with difficulty, but participation and collaboration offers them a great opportunity. And I've seen some examples of this in some museums, because instead of the model of the curator in the museum holding an object, presenting it to us and telling us what we should think about it, a new model is possible where the curator presents that object and seeks our opinion, our anecdotes, our knowledge. My grandmother had one of those and she used to do whatever, and so on. And that instead of the museum providing information to the public in a one-way street, the museum can collaborate with the public, gaining as much as it gives and making that information available to the future. And for us, many of us today, interested in interactive art, for example, the archiving of that work is very difficult and itself a challenge for the museums. But one of the things that we know that is very valuable is the collection of reports of the experience of interacting with that art. And the very technology that we're using today, and the very technology that the museums are beginning to push forward as part of their post-pandemic strategy, enables them to gather that kind of information so that when they come to archive the sort of art that we've been hearing about from our artists today, they can add to it recordings of information provided by people who have experienced that art as a very important part of the archiving, even when they can't store the work in a presentable way. Even if in 100 years' time they cannot recreate the work, they can provide the information about what it was like to experience that work. So this is a very important change, a change that relates to the politics that Ricardo was talking about, right? That the museum becomes a collaborator with the public, not a provider of information to the public. And this is very important for us. So I think that what we see is a great opportunity for all of us in the new media art world, because all of a sudden we're taken notice of by the museums. But just think about the past. We owe it to our history, not just to make new work that is inspired by a Van Gogh, but also to enable people to see and appreciate Van Gogh. Now, you can only do that by actually physically looking at the painting. A reproduction of a Van Gogh in a book or on a screen is not the same thing by any means. However, the new media can enable the museums to help us prepare for seeing the physical object and help us to unpick what we've seen afterwards and have information added and dialogue following on. So seeing the physical objects that are held by the museums and galleries doesn't disappear. We still need that availability and it's still extremely important. If we look at a Canaletto on a screen or in a reproduction in a book, it can often look quite like a photograph. If we look at a Canaletto physically in a gallery, we see that it is nothing whatsoever like a photograph, and that distinction will remain. But much can be added around it through the new media. And so both the handling of new media by the galleries, the new media art by the galleries, and what they do for the future, and the use of the new media to enhance our appreciation of the old, both can be changed dramatically in this way. And I think that very much of it is collaborative and it is participative. And I think maybe those two words are the words that came out today. Many people talked about this. The time machine that the museum is a time machine that can be enhanced greatly by collaboration and participation. And I think I summarise those two words really as the main things that I've got out of our lovely presentations we've been listening to today. Terry.
You're muted, Terry.
Yeah. Could I just say one thing to what Edward said? I think that was really wonderful. I just would say that there's always a tendency to think of an either or. And I think what's happening now is emerging all these possibilities. But I agree with you that the one exciting new thing that we didn't have before was the artist in the midst of the museum as an essential. The technology in museums has been all this backroom stuff for databases and all of that. So this is a very new thing. And the participation is critical, but it's up to the museum to inspire the engagement. And that's the big challenge. And that's where the artist, the digital artist, can't think of any other person who can be more effective in doing this in ways that are so interesting and exciting to bring the public in if they want to engage. Because they come in, they don't know you walk into a museum. Where am I? What am I doing? And it's when you have this built-in strategy and plan for that engagement on many levels, but where it's being led by artistic vision, then I think you really have something exciting and very new.
And I certainly agree with that.
I think we are ending on a high, which is exactly where we wanted to go. And Ernie, thank you. You couldn't possibly have given a better summary.
It was great. Yes.
But of course, you've gone much further than summarising. You forecast a wonderful future in which some of the artists who we love so much will have, if you like, the biggest possible canvas on which to paint their technological images. And that'll be a wonderful event, which could happen because, as I say, the pandemic has exacerbated the speed at which change is happening. All this will happen probably much faster now than it ever would have done previously. So this is time for conclusion, I'm afraid, because believe it or not, we've spent 2 hours here talking to one another, and it's been absolutely delightful. It's been the easiest thing to moderate because everybody has produced such wonderful points and talks on images, and every talk has sparked up something excellent happening in the next talk, and so on. It remains for me to thank all of you who have contributed to this session, and also to thank Paulo Martinez, who is responsible for bringing us here to Sao Paulo, and for the Dov Weiner, who acted as an intermediary between, if you like, London and Sao Paulo. And he took that role from Jerusalem, and where else should he be? So this won't be the end of our EVA International Sessions. They get better and better, the subjects get more and more interesting. I look forward to seeing you all at another one. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Terry, you forgot to thank yourself.
you.
Because
Thank
it's
you.
been a wonderful
Myself.
session.
Great.
Thank you very much. It's been great. Yeah. And it's lovely to see Jim here as well. So,
Of course, Jim. Yes, sorry, Jim.
Thank you very much to all.
We said a big hello to you at the beginning, and now we'll say an equally big goodbye and good luck at the end.
thank you. Thank you,
Right.
Eduardo. Yeah.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Everybody. Yes, wow, look,
Bye bye.
the number's 11. We have 11. 9.
Yeah.
8.
You should work for NASA. You should.
This is like Haydn's Farewell Symphony. 6.
6.
Maureen. 5. 4. 4. 4. Vladimir. Okay, we have 4 people, a quartet.
That's 4 others. What's with?
Oh, 4 others.
Yes. It's still, that's 12.
Break out your instruments now.
Yes.
This is it. We have a. This is the post.
Well, this is where you find out who isn't actually there at all because they haven't logged out.
3. 3. Let's see how this.
It'll be down to an intimate nonette soon.
Is this a 3 plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6?
8.
Oh, James is there. Jim.
Yeah.
Eduardo. Tiffany.